In this video, you're going to see a recorded presentation from Nick Sonder at the 2024 3D Summit. He's sharing his approach to architectural detailing, and his depth of knowledge combined with his signature graphic style make this talk a must-watch. And speaking of summits, the 2025 SketchUp 3D Summit just wrapped in June. It was packed with presentations from top SketchUp authors and extension developers sharing their latest tips, tricks, and workflows. We had dinner with the SketchUp team and even a party at my office with an incredible taco truck. This event is truly a unique boutique experience for architects, interior designers, and landscape professionals who want to level up their 3D game. Plus, it's a ton of fun. Don't miss the 2026 3D Summit in Denver. There's a link in the description where you can join the list for updates and early pricing. And be sure to subscribe to my SketchUp Workflow channel because this fall, I'll be releasing all the presentations from the 2025 Summit. So now, brace yourself for some true SketchUp and LayOut mastery. Here's Nick's recorded presentation.
I'm just going to start a little animation to talk about how I go about deciding which details are necessary. And this is another house in Nevada. Actually, it's the same house I was showing earlier today. And this is, of course, a Lumion rendering. But what I do on every project, and I've been doing actually 3D details since about 2006, even before I was using full SketchUp and LayOut systems. I was still developing all of my details, and I would export them as images into AutoCAD and then note them up in AutoCAD, just because I thought the visual context made a lot of sense, especially because we have a large Spanish-speaking workforce in our construction industry, and they really appreciate actually seeing visuals as opposed to trying to read the notes and translate the notes. And on a 2D elevation or a 2D section cut or detail, it just becomes a little bit overwhelming for them to visualize. So as I'm developing a project and looking around the home, I start to clearly identify all of the details that I need to do on a home. So I've covered basically all the weatherproofing issues that come about. So I'll always look at what type of roofing we have, what type of roofing content we have, not just the material, but what are the connections, the eaves, if there's a ridge, all the roof to wall connections, where we have waterproofing for a deck up to a wall. I include those as part of what I consider roofing details because we actually use roofing products for our waterproofing of decks. And so having the 3D model is actually a really nice way to just go around the entire structure and determine which details will be necessary, which types of windows we have, which types of doors, because all of those details will be different. If we have a pocketing telescoping door as opposed to just a center sliding door or a glass French door, all of those would require individual details. And some homes I end up with all of those types of doors on a home. On the windows, it's pretty typical what we have, especially if it's just a nailing flange situation. And then I just have details that describe the different types of trim. That goes on into the interior. So you can see this is the interior of that space, where I'll identify any interior details that I need to have inside the full set of drawings. And so that'll be all the interior doors, the interior trim on the windows, interior trim on the base. If there's any special details on the interior, if there's a particular beam or something with the fireplace that's a little unique, that'll also get detailed. And so I'm going to phase this out. I know it's fun to look at, but what brings this to reality is actually looking at the details of the home. And so this is actually the SketchUp model. And in this case, this is just the house. I had mentioned I do multiple SketchUp models. And this is actually a different house, but I'm using it as an example to show something a little different from the other one. And this is a little bit more traditional form, but again, when I detail in SketchUp, I am keeping the level of detail pretty efficient. The way I'm showing the flashing and the sill, I want it to look this way in the details, but I don't want to try and incorporate that all throughout the model because it would create a massive model file, and there's no need to do that because the drawings that are generated from the house model are going to be at 1/4 inch. So no one's going to see the level of detail anyways. That's also why I'm a big proponent of not showing sheathing or drywall on the interiors in my models because, quite frankly, there's really no need. We only need to tell the contractor where the studs are, what that dimension is, and then everything is applied to it. So what I decided to do, and this was early on, was I started to create basically little vignettes of details. And these are just, if I turn off the fog, you'll see the extents of, and I apologize, I'm of course, probably don't have the fog in my tray open. God, phew, I could find it. Again, my experience with 2024 is zilch. So you can see that vignette just kind of goes off into nothing. So again, I try to keep these models very efficient. Originally, when I was doing models, I was actually detailing every single condition I would have as an individual model. And even back then, I looked at some of my 2006 and they're atrocious. No groups, components, everything's extruded off of one thing. I eventually then got smart about the modeling, and so everything becomes individual groups. And some of them are like multiple groups because it'll be a particular type of assembly on this condition. In this case, this is a timber framed flat roof. For instance, that last house, the first one I showed you in the earlier morning, that one has a lot of these flat roofs. And we use, where we use a PVC single ply system. It's expensive, but it really works well in snow country. We also put a lot of times a ballast on it if it's required by the homeowners association. So as I moved along and actually working with Matt, we were talking about a way to make this even more efficient. And there's some things I like about the system, there's some things I don't that I've run into, and I'll go through both of those. I'll be honest about all of that, of course. But basically, what we've come up with is you create one model. In this case, this is an eave for a PVC flat roof, but it has multiple conditions that it covers. So it will cover not only timber framing, but it would also have a framed condition where we have, as you can see here, decking underneath with, and we're required to do this for fire, we have 5/8 exterior type X gyp sheathing underneath, and that's to protect for fire. If we have an assembly that's timber frame with 2x decking, we're not required to do that because those meet the requirements, at least the old requirements, for calculating for a 1-hour assembly, as long as you have more than 4 inches of width and 8 inches of height, nominal. And so what we've done then is we've created these little assemblies. It's all grouped and it's super confusing in the working model scene. So I don't actually edit in this unless I really have to. I'll usually pick one of the other scenes. So usually the first scenes start out with a very simple condition. So in this case, it's just a drip edge on a PVC roof. So it's very simple. Everything just sheds out to a drip edge. In this case, it's showing a cleat tying to a flashing piece that then goes underneath the flashing cap of the PVC, and then the PVC roofing rolls over the edge, so it kind of double protects it in case the seam at the PVC flash fails, which I've never seen that happen. But just in case it does, water would still not get into the assembly. And then as we moved on, I used to just take notes, and I'd create notes and leaders and then save my details as a layout file. And I'll show how I do that in a minute. But then, I can't remember when it happened, but we were able to provide more information into the model for groups and components. And so each of these little elements, if I click into this group, because this shows like LO standard, so it's a level layer of just a standard condition, nothing crazy like a gutter or a raised curb or something like that. But if I double click into these, each and every element has a little bit of information related to it. So in this case, it shows the instance of 2x6 trim. Or in this case, I'll try to click on that. That is a bituminous ice and water protection, which is self-adhered ice and water shield, basically, as a secondary layer. Every one of those pieces of information that you place into the model into the group, you can then extract that information directly using auto text and layout. So it makes it very easy, especially if you do an update or if you change a material or if they get a new product that becomes something you would rather use, you update that and it'll update the the layout file, and the details just continue to develop. And these details, I always add to them. And so I don't necessarily start details from scratch anymore because I have such a huge library, but the basic concept of how I start these things, and I won't go too much into this because it's a big can of worms. Let me see if I can find it. So I have a basic, and this one I was starting to do one just to lay it out. This is a template, and it's just a SketchUp template, and usually there'll be nothing in it at all. And what I have tied to it is in my components is I'm going to go back a few layers here, is a folder that I have which I call Detail Builder. And inside those are individual components. Oh, I went too far. Let me see. There we go. So it has these little component folders that each have things like air and moisture protection. Then inside that we'll have like 20 mil crawl space vapor retarder, 20 mil vapor or barrier, something different. And really they're the identical component, but they have different notation attached to it. Didn't necessarily have to do that because I could have done that within one component by making multiple groups inside that component and then assigning different information between each group. And then in layout, when you grab the information, it'll drop a menu down and you can choose which one you want, which is very handy for these details. In this case, I was starting to do this and I was going to model this live, but I realized as I was modeling this that I unfortunately grabbed my entire incorrect detail folder, and so everything was really difficult to find in there. So what I found works, but it's a challenge, but I'll show you a basic example. So in here I loaded a pre-made door frame. I dropped in a layer of drywall. In this case it's showing as 5/8 exterior gyp, but if I click on it into a model, because it's the same, it'll show exterior grade gyp sheathing. This is for the one I was doing was for a garage 20-minute assembly, so we're using 5/8 exterior sheathing on just that wall that connects to the living space. But there's other elements in here as well. So I have things like the door frame, and it'll have different components for the door. So for instance, there's the 20-minute door bottom, 20-minute door top, and those are just like this component here. And that'll give enough information in my detail that it can label it as a solid core 20-minute door. Likewise, it'll have the threshold that I can bring in. Also things like a French door side, and it has all the nailing flange. These I actually model off of, so if I drag it in, bring it up here, these are model off Sierra Pacific. And so this is a French door frame. So if I was designing a French door, I would then come in here and place that, you know, assuming this was actually like the plywood sheathing, get it right on that. Whoop. Oh God, I keep right-clicking. And I apologize, my mouse skills are okay, but I generally use a tablet. I don't think I'm on, there we go. And so I place that in its place, and then we will, I'll even like pull that out a 1/4 inch to show the shim space. And then I'll put a model on it of, for instance, like the flashing tape that goes down, and tell them which order it goes in. On a door, you do the sides, the jambs first, then the head last. On a window, you do the sill first, then the jambs, then the head. So it tells them how to properly flash a window and a door. 9 times out of 10, they miss it, and I'm amazed they still don't do it. The big one that they almost always miss is I always do a metal flashing pan on the sill, and then that's flashed into the wall. I have yet to see one installed. When I come out, they're like, "What? We never do that." It's like, go to New England. And so there's lots of little components, and they're all very small files, and these are all loaded into separate file that I do actually keep out of the scrapbooks folder. I don't use the scrapbook folder or the component folder for all my components within the SketchUp program, because then it loads it directly onto my operating drive as opposed to on my storage drive, which has much more capacity. But once you've established the connection, you don't have to worry about it again. This being a new file in 2024, and I opened it up about an hour ago, I realized I hadn't done that yet, so I had to quickly find. That's when I found out I had the wrong folder, but it'll work for the purposes of today. And so if you're starting from scratch, that's basically the concept, is I bring in these little components. Once you have a library built up enough, you don't ever have to do this again from scratch, unless it's some very, very unique detail. But for all the details I have now, I have a pretty vast library. And so eventually it gets to the point where it's, let me see if I have a door. So I do have this is a set of details, and see how confusing it is. This is in the working model scene of glass doors. And so this will cover all my conditions of glass doors. So in this case, and it's usually in this one, it's separate from like a pocket sliding door or a nano wall or anything like that, because those require a lot of different conditions, especially the pocket door, because you have to create a full soffit for it, because the expansion on the actual head assembly can get to be 12 to 16 inches wide, depending on how many panels you have. Same with the threshold. But then each of these scenes that I create will have specific elements to it. In this case, it's a 3x8 head. And then each of these components, again, will have that information in there, where it says 3x8 head, and there it'll say window head flashing. Now, that one I'll go into again in a group, and what I typically do is I'll just have a generic name for the component, but in the group itself, I'll put the more detailed information. So there it says the metal Z flashing with Kynar finish. Likewise, there's that flashing to flash the flashing against the air filtration system. And so we have there, it's just self-adhered bituminous flashing. Likewise, if I go to the wall assembly, you can see all of these have just a little bit of information. So I go to there. If you can see the full text, it says self-adhered in air infiltration barrier. And then it'll have, basic information. Usually on this, if I click in it, it'll say header C structural drawings, so we don't ever end up with conflicts. But what's nice is the detail shows a lot of how this whole assembly works. So we have the nailing flange on this, in this case, a slider. It shows the shim piece, the foam insulation we use to fill the gap, the sealant that we use, which we use a Sikaflex 1A, and I think that's pretty common. I don't know about in the rest of the country, but there'll be that information. There it says number 2, but it'll be repeated right there. So you don't end up with that number 2 in your note. Because in some cases that detail might appear in a couple different configurations within a single detail. And I don't bother to go back and change that component name, then I'll just do it with inside the group. And again, with the self-adhered flashing here. And then this will show that it's a metal-clad door and frame. We don't give much more information than that, because we do give them the flexibility to look at other manufacturers like Marvin. Sierra Pacific's really popular where we are just because they have huge support in our area. So that's generally the window we go with. Yes?
That little extrusion and that kind of stuff, is that something you pulled off of the manufacturer?
I did. I pulled it right off the website, and then made it a surface, extruded it, added some materials to it. Yeah. So I know it matches their profiles, but it's really not that important. The key is actually showing the nailing flange and how it's flashed.
I was just saying, it looks really complicated if you don't know that you can pull that.
Yeah, I wouldn't try. If I was doing one from scratch, I would make it something very simple. But most of them have their profiles available as a DWG. And so you just pull that into SketchUp. Takes a couple of minutes to get it correct. Sometimes you have to do a little work because the AutoCAD drawings they do are not, I mean, there's, a lot of this going on, or 90 million segments. So from there, basically, since I've set these all up as scenes, and you can see there's going to be lots of different ones. This is that same detail, but where we have a French door. Then there's one where we have, a clear story window over a door. Same one, but to a French door. Then this is a more contemporary look, where it's a smaller profile 3x4 trim, which we'll use on a lot of our more contemporary homes. And again, for each type of glass door, in this situation, I combined all the sliders and the French doors because it worked well with how they go together. They're very similar. And then a lot of them are for different siding conditions that I might run into. And so as I develop more and more projects, I'll just go in and change out materials. So I'll have every material covered for a particular project. And so, for instance, here's one with a stone lintel with a true stone. In most of our developments, we can't use the thin veneer. We have to use true 3 to 5 inch stone. So we end up with these larger pieces. And then it'll have the code requirement elements for the steel. Even though we do these stone lintels, in most cases they would be sufficient. Code still requires us to provide a steel support. And so that'll have very specific information for the plan checker, because they almost always ask me to repeat the code. And I tell them that's ridiculous. If it meets the code, I shouldn't have to cite the code reference. Who's had to do that? How many times? Yeah. And so there's one for the French door. And you can see it just continues on. In this case, it's a detail where we're doing looks like a timber lintel in a stone veneer. And so it shows how that's packed out to a larger member and how the bottom is finished. So it still looks like a stone wood piece supporting. There's for the French door. And you can see this goes on and on. These are all just the head details. This is in a case where we're using hot rolled steel. Then I go through and this does all of the jams. And I leave the transitions between the scenes just because I think it's cool. I know it's slower, but I always like that. And then this will show, like this is a trimless condition where we are just butting right to a window jam. And there's some particulars and issues with doing that because then you're exposing the end grain on the wood. So you can see in this case, we actually use an aluminum J-bead that wraps that corner, and those all slide into that slot. And we color match the J-bead to match the window so it just looks uniform. But then it protects that inside edge of the siding because otherwise it starts to buckle. And again, for the French door. And then for the stone, showing how that rolls in, and shows all the components that we use for stone veneer, the anchors, the 9-gauge wire, the mortar, and we do it differently. When I first moved to the area, I was detailing everything with a 1-inch airspace like we do in New England. Like all the masons, like, we don't do that here. I'm like, well, what do you do? And he goes, well, we use wicks. And if anyone knows what wicks are, it's like basically like a rope that they run in the back to collect all of the moisture, which I tell them, that's no way that's going to work as well, but nobody will do it with a 1-inch air gap. So I had to convert. And so these go on every detail. Here's another jam, corrugated metal, one for hot rolled steel, and they all kind of correspond to each other. Then it goes into the thresholds. And so it'll have different conditions depending on the thresholds. In this case, this is an upper deck that's using a pedestal paver system where we're trying to get as close. I'd never make it flush to the floor because we always want to have a little bit of a drop just in case we get that wind-driven rain. And even then, I'm still using a backer rod and sealant between the two edges. In this case, I don't use this system anymore. This is modified bitumen torch down. We just have too many problems with it being installed incorrectly and cracking. Less concerned on a deck, but on roofs, I just will not use it at all. So in all those systems, we've gone now to a PVC system. And the nice thing with the PVC is you don't even need cant strips. You can just roll that stuff up onto the wall, and they have special like outdoor or outside corner flashing pieces and boots for everything. And it's 50-year warranty. And one of the only manufacturers that I know that basically tells us we don't even need a pitch. You can have this flat. And they still hold to the 50-year warranty. But you pay for it.
Is that like EPDM?
No, it's PVC. So if you grab it's thick too, it's 80 mils thick. So like that thick, and you can bend it 90 degrees and it won't crease. It's even in cold temperatures. It's really amazing stuff, but you pay for it. It's not cheap, but better safe than sorry. It's the only way you get a 50-year warranty, because the modified bitumen, you're going to get 15 to 20-year max. And you know how warranties go. When it's not installed correctly, which is 90% of the time, it doesn't cover anything. And so this will continue down this is a case where it's at a patio. And so this reflects the waterproofing systems that we use for all our crawl spaces, which is a multi-tiered system. So we will have like a mirror drain system to a sheet waterproofing to a sprayed on waterproofing system. We've run into too many leaks in our area that it's better to be safe than sorry, especially with these lesser expensive materials to add them up. And the mirror drain's a must, because it really pulls all that moisture away, especially when it's backed up with a nice, you can see we have filter fabric lining all of our gravel. We have to do that. If you don't, in our area, the sediment fills those systems within probably 5 to 6 years, and then they're worthless.
Is that going down to a drain pipe or something?
Yeah, at the bottom, leads all the way to the French drain. I think I might have actually, it's funny you asked that. I think I might have actually did do that. So this is a retaining wall that's retaining living area in this case. And so this is showing on the outside where we bring that up to the sheet waterproofing coming up to grade. The mirror drain sits just below so you don't see it. And then at the bottom, this gravel leads to the perimeter drain set at the bottom of the footing. So we were having this discussion earlier, because a lot of contractors and a lot of architects are used to that drain being right here. So if you have a slab condition like this, that works, but you have to ensure that the depth of that footing is pushed down far enough that that drain is set at least a couple inches below the slab. Because if you don't, any water that comes up from groundwater, takes the path of least resistance, is going to go inside before it hits the drain. And I've seen it happen. I saw a massive lawsuit happen, $1 million in damages on one of my projects. And I was able to just walk away from the whole thing by pointing out this was the detail, and what they installed after the discovery was done was not what they did. So it's kind of scary, but it happens a lot.
And it's all PVC?
Yeah, and so this is all, I spec all hard pipe PVC, drain tile, as opposed to the flex pipe, because the problem with the flex pipe, you can see we're doing the gravel, and if you've got a full understory, that flex pipe will just get crushed from the weight of the gravel. And that's been a big problem as well. But I still see, went out on a job site and they had buried everything, and on the end I saw the corrugated flex coming through, and I said, you guys did cleanouts on every corner, right? Look at me, blank stare. Cleanouts? We don't need that for drainage. You might.
So is the PVC, was that perforated?
Yeah. And so then we actually go to another extreme. So we actually put that also on the interior. Just in case that water does make it there, it has another way out before it gets into the interior and the drainage. And sure enough, that was omitted as well. We also, we do intermediate pipes now also on a spacing of about 10 feet all the way across under the slab. It's just cheap insurance and well worth it. And we do, just like John was mentioning, we do all drain rock under all our slabs. If this is below grade and it isn't able to daylight, yes. If it is, if we daylight, that's typically what we do, is we just take that out and it goes into a dry well. And then that dry well, we have specific notation that the dry well, the top of it, is set a minimum of 2 feet below the lowest point in the crawl space or the lower floor slab. That way, if it ever backs up, it overflows and out as opposed to back up, because that happens too, and I've seen it happen, backs up and comes into the house. So you've done all this work and you've basically created, if there's a massive rain, you've ensured you're going to flood your retained first floor.
How far away is that from the perimeter?
From the house, we do try to keep it as far away as we're allowed to. A lot of times we are, some developments say, hey, no, you've got to keep it within the setbacks. And I say, you know, that's irrational. It's below grade, no one sees it. And if we put it out towards the edge of the property line, it's not going to affect anyway. This is only for emergencies when we're exceeding that, you know, 100-year event, which we've had 3 in the last 5 years. Which? It depends. I give them flexibility on that. So sometimes into a dry well, we might have 4 pipes coming in. But we do try to tie them where we can, where it makes sense. I don't want to put it all to one piece and out, because then you've really kind of limited the possibilities. Because, you know, rodents, anything, they'll find a way. Chew through the pipe, get in, die, plugged. And there's no way to really find that out until it's too late. Morbid, I know. And so in this case, the detail is showing, you know, in the interior finish where we have the furring strips, the 1.5 inch of rigid insulation, and then the drywall and baseboard and any finish that we have. And a lot of times I won't necessarily show the exact finish. I'll just say floor finish, see schedule. In this case, this also captures, if this doesn't go full retaining at some point, we will have an issue to deal with where we have a step in the wall, and we either fur that out just to make it one wall, or in a lot of cases we'll do a little wainscot detail in that room, like that. So these are all great. So what I do next, which something that I developed later, and I honestly can't remember when, but it was probably, I'm guessing 2006, 14 or 16, was to place all of these things, details, into scrapbooks. And so I have a big scrapbook library that has all different types of details. In this file, because it wasn't the correct file that I meant to grab, I just quickly loaded in the doors. So you can see I can go through and choose a particular scrapbook folder, and then it'll have all of these jams. And I just kept it 6 per page so that you could actually look at it and see what it is and read the little caption, so I know basically what I'm looking at. And you know, I always tell folks when they, because we have these details for sale at mastersketchup.com if anyone's interested, and they won't do what I'm going to show you mine are doing today, which is good, because what happened is not good. But it's nice because it's a good size, it's easy to read, they're easy to edit, so when I edit them, I have one actually already open. So this is what the actual scrapbook looks like. And so all the text is, obviously this text doesn't come out, that's just so you can see what you're looking at, but all this individual text is actually pointing at that element. So if I go into these pieces here, that's looking at that. So if I pull this out, it's just going to say group name, but it's looking at that 2x6 trim. So if I was going to add a note, and I wanted to place one here, I can choose. So in this case, it is that self-adhered, so I'll just click that. In my template, which I don't have, these are all pre-sized, the notes are set, so I don't have to worry about doing what I'm going to do right now, which is that. So I can see the whole note. So on the actual layout template for details, which actually I might, no, I don't have that. My scrapbook layout template actually has just notes there, all ready to go. And when I load in a new detail, then I just double click on it and I can choose the note. So it goes really fast. My detail drawings actually get produced faster than just about any of my other drawings. So I'll usually on a home have, you know, up to 8 sheets of exterior details, 3 sheets of interior details, and 2 to 4 sheets of assembly details. And I usually put that whole detail package together in a couple of days. And then I key them all into the sections. But what it does is it helps keep all of those other drawings that are at 1/4 inch, like the building sections and plans, keeps them still nice and light and fast, where all this detailed information happens in the actual details, which is, you know, what we've always done. Just in to me, a more engaging imagery that makes a lot of sense. And if, you know, you can't read the notes, a lot of times, you know, people that are in the industry or, you know, contractors that have installed windows multiple times will look at it and go, okay, I know exactly what he's looking for. Unless, of course, they're looking at the window sill and they ignore it. Let me see if I haven't. So this is a house that I just completed that just went through the building department. This is the one that came back with no comments, which was nice. And the way I structure the actual detail sheets, as you know, as I drag all of these in, I use my SketchUp model to basically create a list of the details that I need to have. And this house had a lot of different door types. So it had, on the entry doors, usually what I start with, it had a clear story above the window. It had this kind of funky detail with a little narrow profile for the head. On all the French doors that, or doors that didn't have a clear story unless it was a stone veneer, like in this case. And then the way I'll set it up is all the ones on the top are the head, all the ones in the middle are the jambs, and all the ones in the bottom are all the threshold conditions. And so in this case, these are multi-page layout files, so it has each one. So in this house had 8 pages of this. And so this continues with doors, because this house had basically every type. It had sliders, French doors. You can see it had the lift and slide pocket doors. So it has all of that information showing how that threshold functions, as well as the jamb and the pocket, as well as the head. In this case, it was kind of particular. We're doing, this was a custom detail specific to this house, where we had this really thick, heavy metal band that runs around the living room and on the garage side. Let's see, I think I have that open, which is this right here. So I capture what that profile edge is from the model, and then I'll bring it into SketchUp, or into the detail piece, to match exactly what that profile is, and then I think about how I'm going to build that out. So in this case, I just made these individual blocks that are cut to the shape. We put those at 16 on center, and then solid where we need all the nailing. So we have it up here, so it'll notch up and around there. Come up here, we have blocking in between, and then a continuous piece here. So this is one piece all the way back to the wall, notched over this ledger, and then a continuous 2x2 here that gives me nice solid nailing for all of my corners. Technically, I should have another solid piece of blocking on the end, but at 16s, I'm usually okay with them just spanning that. On the underside, I wanted something more solid because I'm a big fan of using cleats to hold that top piece of flashing, because when it gets large, that really helps it be really stable for less chance of oil canning. I also spec some pretty heavy gauge. You can see a lot of these are done at 18 gauge, which is fairly thick and stable, but it gives a much cleaner look. In some cases, we go to 16 gauge for hot rolled steel especially. So we don't, the oil canning drives me nuts. I just had a project where they ignored this and they used 26 gauge everywhere. And the owner said, I'm fine with it. And I said, well, you have the final say, but I think it looks atrocious. So, and again, so these will continue. You know, I start out with the doors, and then it will transition here to garage doors, then to windows above doors. In this case, we have a clear story over a garage door. Let me jump to that model here, which you can see right there, which also has that metal band, although the metal band is slightly different in size, so that has a separate detail. And then it'll go to the window details. Now the windows, it depends. If we have lots of different siding, I'll end up with lots of different details, but in this case we really don't. So we really ended up with, I believe, just those 3 as a typical window detail. I'm wrong. So we do have one here where we have metal siding, and then we had some where we have stone veneer. But again, in this case, it was wood. This was a custom detail just for this job, so it had a really narrow piece. And these are a pain in the butt to install. They hate that because we drill with lags straight through to keep that profile, and so we're using 1/2-inch lags by 8 to 9 inches to get it into each stud. They love me when they do that detail. At least they don't have to plug it because we flash over it. And then this last one, I'm trying to see why this was different. Oh, this is one where we had a very special condition where we brought up a really high wainscot of stone, and then it transitioned to wood siding above, and then we did a metal sill and completely covered the slope sill. So the sill shows it, and that actually shows that pan flashing that 9 times out of 10 nobody installs. Does everybody install that where you guys are? Yeah? Do they actually install it, or do they just, yeah. So I'm originally from New England. We always did it and made sure, and it's turned up on the sides. That way any water gets in, it's out. In California, you're lucky. It's almost always just done this way, and you're lucky if they install the flashing in the correct order. So you can see I've got that sill flashing installed first, because I actually have to tell them that. But then it'll transition to a lot of details on all the different roof conditions. And so we have a contemporary, sort of contemporary, traditional, called transitional design. That has, in this case, it's got a shed roof. And so this shows how that shed roof is being designed. And in this case, we did kind of a partial coverage of metal. So the top fascia is completely wrapped in metal with a small cleat below, and then it transitions to wood below. And again, you can see the fire rating that we deal with the 5/8. You'll notice we have no venting. We don't vent our roofs at all. We use closed cell foam. And we use a combination of 5 inches of closed cell foam, which gets us in our roughly R35, technically R34.5. And then we put unfaced bats below that at R19. And those systems have been working pretty well. Gives us a really good R value on our roofs, over 50. And we use all engineered framing for our roofs. They're all done with LVLs.
No ice damming on that?
Sorry?
No ice damming on all that built-up insulation?
No, we still get ice damming. It does happen. We do put 2 layers of ice and water shield down, and the 2 layers is required on anything that has a pitch of less than 2 and 12. And so you can see on that note, it'll say 2 layers. And of course, under metal, we have to use the high temp version, which is also forgotten many times. And so we'll end up, some have 3 layers because we make them put that high temp on the top. But we do get ice damming. It's less with metal just because you get the sliding factor. But those north sides can be a real problem. Sometimes we will do a lot of heat taping on our roof systems, especially in valleys and on those conditions on north eaves where it's an issue. We also do a lot of snow retention depending on the roof design. Like this house actually does have some snow retention. But again, going through, it'll have every type of detail. So in this case, this is the eave, this is the rake. And again, the key on this, and I always caution folks to don't just randomly do details, but use manufacturer's details. And this is a classic example of, I get so many contractors that don't install the rake flashing piece that comes from the manufacturer. And it's a dedicated piece or multi-piece edge that comes with the warranty, and 9 times out of 10 they go flat to the edge, and that doesn't work. Lay it on top of a standard edge flash. I think I have 1 job where they did it correctly, and I don't have much say in it. Once it's installed, I always put it to the owner, hey, this is not installed correctly, are you okay with the look? And oddly enough, most of the time the client's just like, yeah, I don't want to deal with it. And I was like, okay. But you can see that upper detail that I showed you before, we continue that down on all the eaves. So that matches that and the rake. So we get this nice thick band of metal that wraps around the whole roof. Gives it a really nice look. And then these details will continue, especially the roofing, where we capture all the roof to wall conditions. Here it's where it's parallel, here where it's perpendicular to the roof. This roof also has a ridge, shows how we frame up the ridge cap. And you can see that's also where it's noted about the closed cell foam tight to the deck. Then we have, in this house, we do have a valley in a couple locations, not many, I think mainly just around the chimney. And then these are all the PVC details where we have a raised curb so you don't always see that sloped edge. And that gives it a nice clean look on the outside of the curb where it also has that cleat to a nice deep fascia on the end. And that fascia can vary in depth. I'm showing it built up with a 4x6, but it depends if we have a really long run or a deeper gravel or stone ballast, then we will lift that up as required. I just have to explain that to them usually in the field. But then I'll start to look at things like outside corners. And in this case, we're doing a trimless corner. And the detail in this case is it's got an extruded aluminum corner screed, which we'll use. That's preferably anodized black. And then we bring the corner board right to it. I'm not a big fan of this detail, so I actually tell folks not to do it, but sometimes they're insistent. I explain to them the problem is we still end up with exposed end grain. Yeah, I try to minimize it as much as I can. You know, these pieces are pretty durable, but the bigger problem that we have with this condition that I don't like is a lot of times we're using a 1x8 siding, and that's about the limit. If you go any bigger than that, you can really start to see the cupping, but even on 1x8s, and if you have the exposed corner, it just looks really bad. Whereas if you have it trimmed out in wood, you don't see it. But in the end, you know, I let the client know about all of this, and I show them pictures of projects where this has happened, and they still just want it because they like the look. And more details again of inside corners and how those are treated, especially when we have transitions of materials. I only transition materials on inside corners, never on outside. And so I'll have each condition where that occurs. If you see one out of place, that's because I went through the drawings and went, oh shit, that one goes there. Yeah, and then there'll be various exterior trim details, you know, the different water tables that we have, different flashing at the deck. This is a pedestal deck system on top of the PVC where we have exposed timbers. And this is a concealed gutter that goes to an exposed scupper. And then this is a case where we do run heat tape in all of those, so we don't ever get it jammed up. And then a simple detail of the railing. It just shows the wood cap and then a welded steel frame. But all of this will match the actual SketchUp model, but the SketchUp model just shows it in a much simpler form. So if my 3D mouse, I miss it so much. But you can see there, that's that same detail. And then let me go back to that. That continues. So then I'll also include a lot of site details, and this house had a lot of different ones, which will show patio walls and planter walls, the retaining wall detail that we were looking at earlier. In this case, it was to heated space, so those other two details that you saw, those actually will appear on the interior detail set. I only have the exterior details shown here. You know, little details like this are all custom, where we have a concrete bench. So this is all cast concrete with architects reinforcing, probably way overdone, but yeah. And then, you know, the stairs as well, where the stairs are concrete with a paver that is basically mortared down to the concrete. This will be a patio edge where we're doing and showing that we're doing board form, exposed concrete. This is that planter wall that has a stone veneer to it on concrete. We do on all of our walls, you'll notice drainage is a big issue where we are because of how much snow melt we get. So even the back sides of walls are always drained, especially on patios with pavers, because those can flood. And it's crazy to see, but it happens. And even this is a case where we have actually just a rockery wall, and we will back those with drainage behind it as well. If it gets really tall, we might do one up towards the top also. In this case, this is just a utility yard screen. So we have found one of the challenges we have is everybody wants a generator now. And with heat pumps, we now have the heat pumps going outside. And so we have to actually create yards, and these are not just yards, we actually have to put roofs over them. So these utility yards get really expensive. And someone, says, well, I just want a generator. They're only, $5,000. I go, yeah, that's for the generator. It's another $6,000 to have it installed with the transfer switch. And then you're going to spend $70,000 to build the enclosure. And it's just the reality, because otherwise they just get crushed because of the extreme weight that we have with the snow. And we see that every year people lose their condensers. And but I'll show little details like this where I can't grab it enough onto the elevations. This is a gate to the utility yard and showing them how that is constructed, what the goals are. This house had a lot of custom details. This is their fire pit on the outside, which also concrete with a stone veneer. You can see it gets a little detailed. And then this is actually a similar detail that I was showing you earlier. This is a jamb to that window that had the transition where it's stone veneer below, which is why this is so deep. And then that transition to the wood siding and in the elevations. I can show you. It's actually one window, and I had to do all that detailing for it. Actually, it's, I guess, a couple, but it's this window right here. So that's what that detail is, cut through that window. Yes, let me see if I can, I'll try and, I think I have that sheet. I did not open it, but I can. Pruitt. You can see how this is how I actually structure all my layout sheets as individual files. It looks like a lot, but you see there's a bunch that are the backup files too.
How do you organize all those SketchUp detail files? What kind of folder structure do you use for those?
So I have let me see if I can find that. This is a little bastardized because I brought the wrong ones, but under my Sonder Architect, let me see. So I have a data folder, so that's a folder that's immediately available on my machine. I don't use a laptop except to present. And in that, I have a SketchUp standards folder. And inside that, there's a bunch of random stuff from over the years. You can see 2017 beta testing. While I still have that, I have no idea. But I have my component library. So inside that, and this has to go through a few things. This will have things like my cabinets, doors. These are like standard components that I use, not the details. But under my details, I have a folder. It's just labeled Detail Library. And this one is the old one, so there's a bunch of other things. And it has that detail builder, which is where I bring in all of those folders that I can read in SketchUp. See, it says updated details. These are the sort of updated details, and I'll show you why. And so is this with the combined details. So it went through so many. I have probably 10,000 details at this point, but some of them are duplicates because I have a bunch that are just individual details of every condition, and then I have the details where we combine them. I was like, great idea, Matt. That should take me no time. And so let me see if I've got so the way it's structured is I have a folder that is a main folder for just the assemblies, because that's kind of a separate set of drawings that I do. And there it'll have floors, again, combined details, but there it'll show all of these details, and those again are details that have multiple conditions contained inside of one detail. Then there's doors, exterior trim, fireplace, and so forth. Some of these have subfolders in them, so with scrapbooks you can't, which I wish you could, and maybe 2024 does. It'd be great if I could click on in the under edit preferences, and I click on which folders I want to go. I'd love to be able to have the folder tree in there, because otherwise, for instance, under doors, that's not a good example. Assemblies is a good example. I have multiple folders. It'd be nice just to hit the assemblies and then I'd have access to all of them. Instead, I have to go in and hit each one individually. I mean, you do it once you've done it, so not a big deal, but that would be kind of cool if it didn't have to go through that, because I do have some cases like that. But you can see here, there's lots of them: fireplace, foundation and crawl space, interior trim. Very simple to get to. There's not that many folders to access all of those details because the details are all combined. So you can see there's only under the windows, it's really just 1, 2, 3, 4 different details to cover all the different window conditions. And each one of those details can produce multiple details on its own. It's nice. The problem I have with it, which I mentioned before, is it can get confusing, where I've confused myself. Not in that one. That one's easy. See, that'd be nice if you opened up at detail and it had 4 individuals. Do I have Windows open? Because Windows is like the worst one. Interior, no, that's the one I'm doing right now. Eaves. I mean, the exterior glass door. I mean, this just goes on and on and on. And what happens is when you start working on the folder, the concept on all of my SketchUp files is I have the one working. Let's see how long this takes to get to that. I mean, thankfully at this point, my scrapbooks, I have so many in there, I can usually do a whole project without having to do a detail, except for this one where we ran into a lot of customs. But this becomes really hard to sit down and try and, okay, I'm going to add another condition. So while I think the concept was good because we just have one detail to reference, and you have the scene set up, it's nice, but actually then going in after you've created 30 scenes, the way I edit it now is I will actually choose a scene that's similar, like this. I know I've got vertical siding, but I don't have this, even narrower trim or different head trim, and then I'll just edit this one, create the scene from this instead of using the working model. But that's my only complaint on it, because otherwise it's worked really well. And the basic concept of how it works is if you have, this is a blank template for my detail sheets. So when I'm setting up the details, I just go into my scrapbooks. The next thing I'm going to hit, I've put in the heads for these 2 sliders. So, and this is at wood siding. So I'm going to look for my jamb that's got a slider. So I'll go through here and I'll go to glass door. It should be easy to find because there's only one page in that. And then I'll find the wood siding one, which is right here. And then I just drag and drop that in, and then it crashes now. So the reason I figured out that I grabbed the wrong file, you'll notice one of the notes is red. So when Matt and I were developing this, we went through multiple versions because we were trying to do this where we would just be able to sell the scrapbooks without the actual SketchUp file attached. And so we embedded them. And we're like, oh, this is working great. And then this started to happen. And so we had to go through each one of them and reconnect it to the embedded model. And so that's what's happening. I mean, it's not a big deal because you could leave it. Technically, the red never prints. Or you can go in and, do the reconnect. Oh, did I just hit that wrong? I did. That's my eyes. Didn't want to convert that. Reconnect to model, and then it goes away. But you don't actually have to do that. But in the set that's for sale, that doesn't happen. Hopefully. But it's you can see how quick that goes. So this one's stone veneer. I would come in and I would drag and drop, and then I can just place it on the guides. And then I would go to the next piece, which is the sills or thresholds. And I'm just going to grab a couple. I'll grab the correct ones for stone. Although this one wouldn't have the stone shown. It does for like a garage door, but then it'll render. That one has a lot that's not connected to the model. But you can see how quick that goes once you have all of them established. You're just dragging and dropping all of your details on a project. And once you get, I have a set structure of how I do it. I always start with the doors for whatever reason, then I transition to the windows, then I go to the roof, then I do trim, then I do site, and then I complete my set. And then and it starts with just a single page, and then I just add a page and just keep loading them in. And it just doesn't take long unless I have a lot of custom details. But even the one that had custom details, that's really just a day to spend doing the custom details and making another scrapbook piece of it. Sometimes I'll do it as an individual detail, like I think I did that on, because if it's a detail I don't think I'm gonna have again, I'll just leave it like this bench. You know, it's rare that someone asks me to do something like this. And so this detail was actually prepared here. I have a scrapbook a scrapbook details template, which I think I told you already just has notes on the side. They all just say group, 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 group with an arrow. And then I just bring in the reference of the detail from SketchUp, and then I edit each note just by moving the arrow, and then I select the choice if there's multiple choices. If there's none, I just pick it and enter. I don't know if any of that's changed for 2024. I couldn't get my 2024 layout to actually open, and I think it was just a download thing. It works on my PC at home, but not on my laptop for whatever reason. Trent was just messing with me, I think. And so that's the goal of this, is to give them all that little bit of detail. Did my sections, there they did open. That I don't want to necessarily show at 1/4 inch. So I keep my sections very light, and these are all referencing the SketchUp section file, which the only editing that happens in that is the placement of the section plane and the creation of the scene. I don't edit the model at all. That's only done in the main model and then referenced back into the SketchUp, or the section model.
That model, is that a component that is referenced back to the original model?
Yeah, so it's just, if there's a change, I just update.
That component will update.
Yeah, yeah, and
We don't have multiple models that we're trying to remember.
no, you don't have to do that. So you do have multiple models. So if you make a big change, and it depends, you know, some changes you don't have to pick up because they're so minor, but if you make a big change, you then go open up your SketchUp, your section model, and you update the reference, and that's it. Then you save it, and then in here, you update the reference also. And it's a couple of steps, but it really does go fast, especially if you're using, you know, Michael stressed that as well. The use of templates is critical. I use them for both SketchUp and layout, and they are set up so that they talk to each other, so that there's a preloaded model, simple model in SketchUp, as well as that's referenced in the template in layout. So when I do a model, I'll just design the model, save it, and then I can just immediately go to my layout template and just update that reference, and boom, it's there. All the layers are set. Because you know, as most of you know, I use actually a combination of stacking viewports. And it's pretty simple for sections and plans. I use the same three layers of stacking. I have the raster viewport in the back. I have the one that's very dark here, that's black. That is just the structure. So none of the trim is on, none of the doors, none of the windows, which makes it render, you know, it's an instant render even in 2021. And then the light gray one is just windows, doors, trim, cabinets, things that are just applied to the base structure. And I think it really helps read, and then there you can see how they're all keyed in.
So you're not worried about, you're not using a section fill because you have a separate layer.
Yes, so the method I use, and there's pluses and minuses to it, is we nicknamed it the Donnelly method. And the way that works, I can show you in the, he's busy, he's got twins. So this is the model, and the way the tags work, this one has some structural stuff. Oh, you know what? That's interesting. Am I looking at the right model? Let's see what happens here. That's working. In the old version of layout, this is 2024. The way we get this effect, because it's an active section fill, is we set all of the tags to be transparent. And the old one had like a little symbol right here had a little cut in it. Am I missing something? Trent, I'm asking Trent. Yeah, so you see the opacity is set to 0. So see this symbol? This is what used to show in the preview, and it doesn't. But what we do is you can see the opacity is set to 0. So what that does is when we do a section cut, the only thing that appears is what's at the section plane. And then we establish what that section color is. It's wonderful because you're not creating line work like I used to do, because even if you set this to a gray, or this one's really dark, there will be like a little outline that it creates. I go pretty dark because sometimes you get this. You can see that little line. And I don't necessarily want that to read on the plan. But what's nice is it's an active section plane, so I can shift it anytime I want. And if, as I'm developing the drawings, I might find that, oh, I've got this thing set at like 2 feet 11 because I'm cut through all the countertops and I want to be just above that, but not into the uppers. So I can adjust. Or if I want to make sure I capture as many windows as I possibly can, because I have windows with sills all over the place. Some I can't, and I just give up, and then in layout, I'll actually just put a white rectangle, a scaled drawing that I measure and place on top if it's a clear story that's 9 feet off the floor. Because there's no other way to do it if it's a section cut. We can't take our section cut. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no way. You could do it with multiple section cuts, because I do this with garages that have big offsets. And then you have to weave it together in layout, which works really well. You don't see where the weave is at all. But there'll be multiple seams that you have to coordinate. Once you've set it up, and I set these all up actually during schematic design. So going back to Michael's awesome presentation on doing schematic and layout, which I'd never even thought of doing, I do it to keep things simple, which is the most important thing in schematic design, is I do a very raw schematic model. So I don't model, the windows and doors are just openings. The windows, I'll throw a pane in there so it looks like glass. But that way I keep it really light and easy to edit for me. But it also gives the volume so they can see it. But it is definitely, not as fast as what Michael was showing, which was, to me, was really intriguing, because I think schematic design over the years, it's kind of too late for me now to change. I think schematic design would be a phase that I would weight much higher than I do my other phases, because my other phases go so fast. Right now, I weight my fee 20% schematic design, 40% design development, 40% construction documents. I should be doing 40% schematic, 40% DD, 20% CD. Because the CDs, by the time I'm finished with my design development, I've already got the site plans, floor plans, elevations, roof plans, sections at CD level. And then when I get to construction documents, it's really adding more notation to those drawings, then creating the other ones like the reflected ceiling plans, MPE, details, and schedules. So I always kick myself because I end up spending definitely more than 50% of my fee, I think, in schematic. Yeah. Yeah.
With the dotting method, how do you dimension?
That's the downside. So you can't dimension to, that's right, because until SketchUp actually can make an acknowledgement of the section cut as a point, you can't dimension to it. So when I have a plan like, I don't know if I have one open, but I'll open it real quick. Or say I was going to dimension, I'll use the section as an example. The problem you have, oh, this is the SketchUp. No, that's the layout file. Bear with me a second. Say I was going to do some dimensions on this, and I've got this hybrid layer on. I can't grab points. I can't even grab points. Well, sometimes I can. There it's capturing the edge. But sometimes it's difficult, especially on the floor plan, to grab anything. But there's no point to grab it. So when I dimension, I actually just shut that. I have that on as a separate layer. So it's still labeled as vector viewport, because I used to do it all by generating from group from slice. I just shut that off. And you going to show me something? I'm going to, the K button?
Go into draft mode.
This isn't 2024. So is that new for 2024? Yeah. So will draft mode shut it off from, change it to a raster? Really? Oh, so I can't do that. That's awesome. So this is, yeah, this isn't a vector. So this is just the section plane I'm looking at.
It should kill all your rasters whenever you have. And see vectors graph.
It'll see, even if there is the hybrid section cut laid on top of it. Well, that would be awesome.
What if you shut off the fill? The section at the back side?
Oh, so what I do, and this section is turning out not to be a great example because you can see when I shut that off, I forgot I use a, what do you call it, my brain right now, end of the day. The clipping mask to hide the bottom part of the model. But in a model, what I'll do for like the floor plan, because now once I've shut that off, I can grab it. And I can actually, because I keep the model simple, like right here, I know I'm on the stud face. So if I go from there to there, there's 5.5 inches. And so I'll do all my dimensioning, especially early on in the project. I make a point to set all my grid lines actually right at the beginning of schematic. Once I have the schematic design showed off or signed off on, I immediately go through and put all my grid lines down, then all my dimensions. And once I have the grid lines on, I can actually dimension to those, no problem. It's going back in to capture all the windows and the walls that fall off the grid lines. And so that becomes a pretty big challenge. And I try to keep it efficient on how I dimension. Let's see if I can open up. We good on time or are we going past already?
Maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay.
And,
Real quick, I'll just open this one file. I say real quick, but
On your raster section, to get that style, is that just, do you have a fog like turned on to kind of like fade that out?
yes, I do, and I can show you that real quick too. So I'm there. Okay, I was opening up. I was like, what was I just doing?
Sorry.
No, I'm a man. I cannot multitask. Ask me to speak, and I stop functioning. So this is the floor plan. But yes, that's. I use fog quite a bit to really let that raster image show depth. It's real. Yeah. So these are the floor plans. I only use 24 by 36 inch sheets because most builders hate the 30 by 42s in the field. So a lot of my plans get broken up into multiple sheets. But I always do a key plan at 1/8 inch so you can see all of those. Let me get up to the pages here. But you can see here, I initially just dimension right to all the grid lines, which is really easy. And I try to keep them as simple as I can. A lot of times it'll depend which face it hits. But if it is a 1/2 inch increment, it's usually hitting on one side of a stud. For instance, this one where it's 2111.5 to that, it's actually the face of a 12 by 12 post. And then I try to keep all the dimensioning as, no duplication of dimensions, because that's where we tend to run into problems. So I always analyze a plan of which dimensions I need off of each grid, so it minimizes the amount of dimensions. I don't typically run overalls unless a contractor asks for it. I found the need for that less and less, so I'll usually just have those single outside strings and then a secondary one that just captures the center line of the windows. And I won't do the opposite side because I'll double check them to make sure if a window's centered that it's going to be equal, but you only need to give them the dimension from one side.
Do you do your grid lines in SketchUp and then come over?
No, I do them all in layout. The main reason I do them in layout is because I know ahead of time most of my projects are going to be too big to fit on one page. If I know it's going to fit on one page, I will sometimes put those grid lines right on that sheet, because then it's easy to manage. If it's on multiple sheets, it becomes really difficult to get the grid lines. As an example, not so much on like this plan would be okay, other than these grid lines would be difficult. Likewise, on the next page, these grid lines and these grid lines would be really hard to grab out of SketchUp. I mean, you could do it, but it would just be kind of a pain. The outside ones are always easy. So after going through that a couple of times, because that's what Zachary does, and I don't know how they deal with these outside grid lines. I think they just do a separate window or have a separate layer that they do when they know the page is going to be structured that way. But to me, that's a little more difficult. I run the grid lines in minutes. The biggest pain for me on a job like this is keeping track of the grid lines. Because you can imagine, you know, this one goes to V. Actually, I think it goes, yeah, to V. I've had ones that I'm into the A, B, AC, AD. But keeping track of those across multiple sheets, because that's kind of manual work. And I've made mistakes before, where I have two V's, where I pulled the grid off one side of a stud on one wall and then off the other side on the other. Contractors usually figure it out when they see that. It's if you've misnumbered it. This one was all good though. Nobody caught anything. So you wanted to see the shade, the fog. All right. Here we go. All right, so in the working model, it's a very simple style. There's nothing on. That's why it stays fast. And God, 2024 is wonderful how fast it is. Maybe that's changed, I guess, when you have all of those on. But on, for instance, the north elevation, I'll have shadows, and I set them pretty consistent on each job. I do lightness to 100 and I do the dark to 35. I've just found that's a good combination that's printed well. And I always play with those to get the most light onto the building. So sometimes, even though, for instance, this is the north elevation, I'm cheating a little bit, using a little artistic license, which I think is fine for a construction document. And then I will also go in, oh, this one doesn't have the fog again. Window. I was glad, oh, it's under, oh, is it window? Yeah, default tray fog. So I will play with this quite a bit because if you go too much, it doesn't print well. And so you can see where I've set the two cursors. And so, I'll play around with those.
That's something you kind of do manually on each project. You don't have
I do have a set one ready to go, but inevitably you're going to have to edit it for the project because you'll have different variations of what you're seeing in the distance. And the goal, like you don't want it like this because then it's very flat, but you don't want it like that because I start missing parts of the building. So I'll just sit there and tone it back until I get it to where I want. And this will be done during schematic. And then I end up not having to, sometimes I'll adjust it, it depends. Like sometimes I'll look at it looks great, then I'll look at it in layout and go, I could get a little more color coming through and clarity, so I'll reduce the amount of fog. And a lot of people don't understand what the two toggles do. I still get confused. I used to have it down. But now I just play with the bars and I understand. I'm looking at basically what's in the foreground, and then this becomes kind of the overall depth of the fog. Yeah, bring it really far back. And the closer you get the two, you can highlight what's in the foreground. And then the further you pull it away, you reveal what's more in the background. I really like it, especially the effects you can see on the roof lines is pretty nice. And I use that on every raster, so the floor plans have it as well. It's very subtle here, but where you start to see it is like on the second floor. And the effect, now this one is really subtle. I usually do more than this because what I like to see on the stairs is, and actually I didn't do it on this house, but I like to do this. See, that would have been really cool in the drawings because now it starts to highlight that upper floor. This is open to the floor below. There's a big railing inside. And then the stair dissipates as it drops. And so that's kind of a really nice look.
Hey Nick, are you using, I know you get a lot of detail in your details.
I do. I use very few and I can't even show you here because right now I have no extensions loaded. The only extensions I actually use, and everybody's like, what? It used to be none. I used to use no extensions. Yeah. But Profile Builder, I think I've been using that since 2016. At Basecamp, I saw that. And I'll use it for a few different things. I use it for all my interior trim, not for doors, because those are all components. So my door components I bring in, and they already have the trim on both sides. And for a baseboard, though, after I've set all the doors and windows, I go in and attack the trim, and I'll hit each room, and I'll, use a 1x4. Sometimes we'll have a really specific, like, multi-piece base, and I'll have that profile for that. A lot of times it's people are just liking really simple 1x4, and we use a lot of alder, like knotty alder, sometimes clear alder, and then just run that around the room. And I will also use it for certain exterior trim also when I have a unique profile, like on this house, that profile that wraps around. The reason I like it is because it creates a solid. If I just do individual trim, a lot of times I end up with not a solid and I have to go back in and put the other side on. I use it for windows that are shaped like, oh, this one doesn't have it. We used to have it. So this window used to have a raked window here, but the association told us no. And so for raked windows, it works really well. So I have a profile for first the frame that goes around, and then I have a profile for the sash that's separate that I will then wrap around. I could put it all in one profile, but I've always had the sash and the frame separate. And so I'll use that all the time, and whenever I have like an odd-shaped window. For square windows, I just have a big library of windows that I bring in, as well as different trim sets. But Profile Builder, if you've never had it, and I don't know if it's the same way. I bought it once, and I keep getting the update for free. I haven't seen 4 though. Did 4 get free? Or is 4 an added cost? Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just remember it wasn't expensive. How much is Profile? Yeah, that's what I remember. And I think I got it on a special of like 50% off the first time. And then 30% off when the new one came out or something like that. So I just bought it. So I have both. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it's well worth it, especially when you see what it does now with all the railings, and you can embed the components into it, which is, I mean, you could do that with 3 also. I actually don't use it though for railings like this because, as an example, this is a railing that's, all the openings are not consistent. They have to, in this case, they're kind of aligning with the framing. And so not necessarily each spacing is exactly the same. So these will be railings that I actually structure separately. I mean, I suppose I could use it and then go in and edit and shift the components over. That would work. But this has, even this has enough detail to show that, for instance, we make these as a full frame that's welded together, and then they can just use wood screws countersunk into the posts. You can see we use a lot of beefy wood where we are. We don't do any built-up headers, so all the headers on the interior are usually 6x12s. Even on small windows, it surprises me, they just throw 6x12s in there. These are all 6x6 posts. All these exterior posts are 12x12. That's a true timber, that's a 12x14. So a lot of big lumber. And we used to be able to get Structural Select #1 for a reasonable price, and now we can't even get the material. So now we're just going DF1s. And getting it radio frequency dried is really difficult now too. And so some contractors are convincing clients to go green. I always caution them because I've had conditions, because a lot of our connections are knife plates. I've had conditions where the post shrunk from the beam, and so you see a gap right through, and that just looks terrible. It's like, get some snow on that thing, load it up. So any questions on the, I know it's a lot of information, but it's just a presentation, not a full workshop on the detailing. I usually, when I did the presentation, and I think the last time I did it was in Palm Springs, and we walked through doing a full detail of a door and showing with using that builder, but that just takes a little time, especially because I have the wrong folder, so it's not so easy. But it is a quick process. It's surprisingly fast, especially once you've built up a library. And as I mentioned, you can get the whole library that's already there and build from that, which is really easier than starting from scratch. I don't even know what it costs, to be honest.
I don't remember either, but it's worth it just to get the structure of everything.
Yeah.
You can swap out no matter what part of the country you're working in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easy to go in and edit, and when you see how they're structured and adding information to groups or components, makes it really easy. Yeah, especially when you open a detail and you click on the working model page. At first you're like, what? Yeah. It's good, I don't even remember the book. Okay. Well, that's where Matt helped me so much. He was so talented at putting together the packages and give me the feedback. The one that really hurt though was when he said, you know, we should combine these all into like single details. And at first I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then about a month into it, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be a giant task. Yeah, yeah. So Zachary did too. If you convince a structural engineer to do SketchUp, they have their full package of details. It's a lot more expensive, I think, than what we charge for the architectural ones. But it's more details too, because their details are gorgeous. I mean, their structural drawings are nothing like structural drawings you've seen. Everything's full color. All of their details are 3Ds, but it's just focused on the structure. And so we go back and forth on our drawings. We talk about the knife plates versus we have a home going up right now that's got these big timber trusses that are framed out of 12 by 12s. And this was a giant ridge, so we used that so we wouldn't have to put a steel ridge beam in. And they're beautiful, and originally we were going to go for fully concealed joinery. And you either hire a timber frame company that costs a fortune, or you go with exposed hardware, which is what we opted for, which still looks beautiful. It's all black with big bolts and really pretty. In fact, that's I think I have a picture of that.
It can be a hot item.
Scary. So those are the timbers.
Nice.
And that's the finished, like that's how they stay.
Yeah, well, they'll of course be stained. They get a nice dark stain on the, that'll be, right now the interior designer wants all the trim, including the trusses and everything, to be the same color. And I'm having to step in as the architect and say, no, you want these to kind of stand out. Because there's a bunch of other timber trim in the house where we're using 3 by 12 at all the openings to case, the big openings. So we want those to really stand out and punch, as opposed to the baseboard trim that butts to it, because it's a totally different wood. This is all fir, so it's going to stain a different color regardless, but I don't want it to try and match. But it's a really cool room. It's suspended from each one of these is a big round light fixture. It's a beautiful spot, and it's huge. I mean, the volume in this room is really amazing. The joists are just spanning to the ridge beam. Oh, they get covered. So they get first a layer of 5/8 drywall, and then they get 1x8 decking that is matched to the outside. So it looks like the decking just continues to the outside. And then the rest of the finish is just drywall on the inside. There's one timber accent in the middle. We have a wall that comes up 8 feet to close off kind of the back end as a separate room, a TV room, and that has a bar cabinetry up to 8 feet on the other side, and that's going to get all reclaimed wood wrapped around it.
Well, I got to say real quick, you were absolutely incredible, and I've never felt more inadequate as an architect.
A big thanks to Nick Sonder for sharing his knowledge and giving us such a clear look at his process for architectural detailing. If you'd like to join us in person next year, here's a link to sign up for updates and early pricing for the 2026 3D Summit. And if you want to keep learning, check out our latest upload right here. This is a good one, I can tell. I'll catch you in the next video.